TIFU by not checking my work email for a few days, which led to a series of unfortunate events at my new job. I'd recently started a new job at a mid-sized tech company. The kind of place where you're encouraged to be independent and proactive, but where the organizational structure is complex enough that it can take a while to understand who does what and how things get done. I had only been working there for about 3 weeks when this all started, and I was still in the phase of trying to learn the ropes, get settled in, and make a good impression. This particular Monday, I came into work feeling like I had finally hit my stride. I'd gotten through the first 2 weeks of onboarding, survived a few team meetings without saying something too embarrassing, and actually started contributing to some of the smaller projects. I was starting to feel comfortable in the new role, and for the first time since I'd joined, I actually felt like I was managing my workload pretty well. The only thing I hadn't quite adjusted to yet was checking my work email regularly. To be fair, I was given a lot of onboarding material and new hire paperwork in my first week. I spent the majority of my time getting acquainted with everything, reading company policies, reviewing my job description, learning about internal tools, and just figuring out the general flow of things. It was a lot of information to take in, and I got into the habit of checking my email just a couple of times a day, mainly to look for anything super urgent or specific to my role. I figured that as long as nothing critical came up, I could always respond within 24 hours. I mean, who doesn't have a lot of emails to deal with at a tech company, right? On this particular Monday, I didn't check my email until around 11 a.m. I grabbed my coffee, sat down at my desk, and finally opened up Outlook. As I scrolled through the usual spam and newsletters, I came across an email that caught my eye. It was from my boss, let's call him John. The subject line read, "Urgent, presentation for client meeting, today." My heart sank. I opened the email and saw that it was sent around 8 a.m. The message was brief but to the point. "Hi, my name, can you please prepare a presentation for our client meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m.? Here are the key points we'd like to cover." My eyes widened as I scanned through the email. The list of points was vague and not particularly helpful, and the email didn't include any specific details about the client or what kind of presentation they were expecting. There was no link to a PowerPoint template or any prior work to reference. Just a vague request to prepare a presentation for an important meeting that was now just a few hours away. I immediately felt a pit in my stomach. I hadn't prepared anything for this meeting. In fact, I had no idea this meeting even existed. In a blind panic, I shot an email back to John. I explained that I hadn't seen the message until just now and asked for more details about the client and what exactly was needed in the presentation. No reply. I waited for a few minutes, then called his extension. No answer. At this point, I was starting to sweat. I looked at the clock, 11:15 a.m. The meeting was in 3 hours. I had nothing. I decided to take matters into my own hands and started researching the client online, digging through any materials I could find on our company's shared drive. I tried to piece together a coherent presentation using whatever scraps of information I could gather. By 1 p.m., I had managed to pull together a half-decent presentation. It wasn't great, but I figured it would have to do. My biggest concern was that I would look completely unprepared in front of the client, especially since I wasn't entirely sure what the expectations were. I uploaded the slides to our company's meeting software and hoped for the best. 2 p.m. arrived, and I logged into the client meeting. I could feel my hands trembling as I joined the virtual call. My boss, John, was already there, and a couple of senior team members were also present. There were about 5 people on the client side, and they all looked incredibly serious, as if they were expecting something extraordinary. I tried to smile and greet everyone, but I felt like I was about to pass out from nerves. John kicked off the meeting by introducing me as the one who would be leading the presentation. I took a deep breath and shared my screen, praying that my shaky hands wouldn't betray me as I began my slides. Almost immediately, the client's representative started asking very specific questions about the content I had put together. Can you explain how this aligns with our quarterly goals? He asked, pointing to a slide I had pulled from an old project. I wasn't sure how to answer, and I stalled for a moment, trying to remember the context behind the data. Well, this is based on the last quarter's reports, but it's not entirely up to date, I said, my voice trembling. I could see John's face tighten up as the meeting continued. Things only got worse from there. Every time the client asked a question, I found myself scrambling for an answer. The more I stuttered, the more it became clear that I was in over my head. The clients were polite but visibly disappointed, and the senior team members on the call kept giving me disappointed looks. By the time the meeting ended, I felt like I had just blown my entire career at this company in front of a room full of people. The feedback from the clients was lukewarm at best, and John didn't say much, which only made things worse. After the call ended, I sat there for a few minutes, staring at the screen, feeling utterly defeated. I didn't know what to do next. I finally opened up my email again and saw that John had replied to my earlier message, just as the meeting was wrapping up. Glad you could pull something together, but let's make sure we touch base next time. I'd expect more preparation in the future. The thing is, that email had been sitting there since 8 a.m. I could have had so much more time to prepare, to get the right information, and to have a successful meeting. But because I didn't check my email on time, I had made a complete fool of myself in front of the client and my entire team. In hindsight, it's obvious. I should have checked my email first thing in the morning and stayed on top of things. But in the chaotic whirlwind of a new job, I let myself slip into a bad habit. A few days later, I had a one-on-one with John where he explained that I would need to work on improving my communication and timeliness, but he also reassured me that this wouldn't be a deal-breaker. He said that everyone makes mistakes, but it was important to learn from them and be more proactive moving forward. I did learn a valuable lesson that day, though. Always check your work email first thing in the morning. You never know when the fate of your career will hinge on a few missed messages. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU. By trying to impress my date with a homemade dinner and nearly setting my apartment on fire a few months ago, I decided I was finally going to ask out this girl I'd been working with for the past year. She was smart, funny, and just the right amount of quirky to pique my interest. We'd been friendly, but I hadn't really had the guts to make a move until one day, she invited me to a team happy hour. After some drinks and light conversation, I decided to take the plunge and ask her out. Surprisingly, she said yes. I was ecstatic. After a few more texts and some back and forth plans, we settled on having dinner at my place. Now, I'd like to think of myself as a halfway decent cook. I'm not a chef, but I can put together a meal that doesn't taste like it's been microwaved. I wanted this date to go well, so I was determined to make something impressive. I had this idea: I was going to cook her a fancy 3-course dinner. For the main course, I chose a recipe I found online, a nice steak with roasted vegetables. For dessert, I'd go for something relatively simple but elegant, crème brûlée. And for the starter, I thought a fresh salad with homemade vinaigrette would be just the right touch. I was feeling pretty confident. I'd made steaks before, I could roast vegetables, and I'd watched enough cooking shows to have a vague idea of how to make crème brûlée. How hard could it be? The night of the dinner, I went all out. I set the table with candles, laid out some music, romantic, obviously, and cleaned the apartment from top to bottom. Everything was looking perfect, until I started actually cooking. The first hiccup came when I realized I didn't have enough butter for the vegetables. But instead of going to the store, because I didn't want to look like I was unprepared, I decided to substitute with olive oil. Simple enough, right? Then, while the vegetables were roasting in the oven, I started on the steaks. I seasoned them, got the pan nice and hot, and laid them in carefully. That's when I made the mistake. I was so focused on making the steaks perfect that I didn't realize the oil in the pan was starting to smoke. And I'm talking thick, choking smoke. Panicked, I tried to turn the heat down, but it was already too late. A tiny flame sparked from the oil and shot up toward the hood vent above the stove. Now, I'm no firefighter, but I know that fire plus oil equals bad news. I immediately grabbed a towel and tried to smother the flame. Of course, the towel caught on fire. I quickly threw it into the sink and started running water over it, all while cursing under my breath. Meanwhile, the fire alarm went off, which only made everything more chaotic. I needed to put out the fire in the pan, but I didn't want to use water on it. I vaguely remembered some cooking show mentioning using salt to extinguish oil fires. So, I grabbed a whole bag of salt, dumped it onto the flames, and hoped for the best. The fire didn't go out. Instead, it sputtered and spat everywhere, creating an even bigger mess. I was getting frantic now. The fire alarm was blaring in my ear, the smell of smoke filled the apartment, and I had a date arriving in less than 20 minutes. What could go wrong? Oh, right. Everything. I ran to the fridge and grabbed some baking soda, hoping that it would help. Luckily, this worked, and the fire finally died down. But the damage was done. The kitchen was covered in black soot, the stove was a mess, and I had nearly destroyed my favorite pan. At this point, I figured I'd have to abandon the steak idea altogether. But the salad was fine, right? I tossed the lettuce into a bowl, but when I went to pour the homemade vinaigrette, I realized I had somehow ruined it by using way too much vinegar. It was a sour, vinegary disaster. I tried to salvage it with some extra olive oil, but it only made the flavor worse. At least the salad wasn't on fire. So, the plan was simple now. I was going to get takeout and pretend I made it myself. I called the restaurant and ordered the exact same dish I had planned to cook, steak with roasted vegetables. I even threw in a crème brûlée for dessert to cover all my bases. But here's the kicker, I didn't think about the timing. I had about 10 minutes to get everything set up before she arrived. I quickly tidied up what I could, set the table, and tried to act casual. But the place smelled like smoke, my hair was frazzled from stress, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was doomed. When she finally arrived, I greeted her with a nervous smile and immediately offered her a drink. I was trying to act confident, but I could see her eyes darting around, taking in the smoky air and the odd, still slightly blackened oven. I told her that I was experimenting with some new flavors, but she didn't seem too convinced. I went to grab the homemade steak and veggies, but to my horror, the restaurant had messed up the order. Instead of the steak, they gave me chicken. Now, I had to figure out how to turn this disaster into something that didn't scream. I totally failed. I quickly told her, oh, I decided to change things up a bit. Chicken, you know? Something light and fresh. She seemed like she bought it, but I was dying inside. The conversation was awkward, and I couldn't stop thinking about the fire that had nearly consumed my kitchen. After a few minutes, I offered the crème brûlée for dessert, hoping it would redeem the evening. I went to crack the top of the crème brûlée with the little spoon, only to find it was completely soupy. The restaurant had either undercooked it or messed up in some other way. It was like eating cold, custard-flavored soup. The look on her face was polite, but it was clear she was just trying to make the best of it. To top it all off, when I walked her to the door at the end of the night, I gave her a hug and promptly knocked over a lamp. She laughed awkwardly, and I could tell she was trying to make it seem like the night hadn't been a total disaster. We said our goodbyes, and I never heard from her again. Looking back, I can't blame her. I nearly set my apartment on fire, served her burnt food, and tried to cover it all up with takeout and excuses. I was so determined to impress her that I completely forgot to keep it simple and just enjoy the night. Moral of the story? If you're going to cook for someone, keep it to something you know you can handle. And if you're going to make a big deal about it, don't burn down your kitchen trying to do so. TIFU by getting my girlfriend's brother arrested at my own surprise party. I've always been a pretty laid-back guy when it comes to my relationships. My girlfriend, Jessie, and I had been together for over a year, and things were going smoothly. Her family is, well, let's say they're a lot. They're the type that believes in showing affection in loud, boisterous ways and making every event feel like a mini festival. In contrast, my own family is calm, quiet, and reserved. So when Jessie suggested we combine our two families for a surprise birthday party for me, I was hesitant. But hey, she's my girlfriend. I wanted to make her happy, so I reluctantly agreed. She promised it would be low-key, just a few close friends and family members. Little did I know, low-key meant 20 of her closest relatives crammed into my apartment with enough food and booze to feed an army. The day of the party rolled around, and I tried to prepare myself mentally for what was about to go down. Jessie assured me everything was under control. Still, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Jessie's brother, Kyle, was coming, and while I liked him well enough, he had a reputation. He was charming, sure, but he was also one of those guys who would make a joke 1 second and then act like you didn't exist the next. He had a knack for always being the life of the party, but at times, he could be a bit much. I'd seen him get a little rowdy at family gatherings before, so I hoped that wouldn't happen tonight. But my gut told me otherwise. When I walked into my apartment that evening, the first thing I noticed was the smell of greasy food and the sound of music blasting from my speakers. Jessie had, of course, managed to somehow turn my quiet living room into what felt like a concert venue. People were already mingling, some chatting, others dancing like they were at a nightclub. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I smiled and waved at everyone. It was my birthday, after all. As I tried to get comfortable, I noticed Jessie's mom in the kitchen, busy preparing more food. Jessie was running around talking to everyone, and Kyle was nowhere to be seen. At first, I was relieved. But then, I spotted him in the corner of the room, huddled with a group of people. I knew what that meant. Kyle was already stirring up trouble. It started innocently enough. A few jokes here and there. He was the life of the party, like always. But the more he drank, the more I began to notice that he was becoming a little too animated. I could tell he was getting on some people's nerves, but nobody wanted to say anything. I was talking to one of my friends when I heard raised voices coming from the living room. I turned around to see Kyle laughing hysterically, standing way too close to one of the guests. The guy, Steve, who I didn't know well but knew enough to know he was a bit of a hothead, looked genuinely uncomfortable. "Hey, man, back off a little," Steve said, his face flushed. Kyle, of course, didn't take that too kindly. "What? You scared, bro?" he slurred, clearly drunk. "I'm just having a little fun." Steve didn't look like he was in the mood for fun. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could see things were about to escalate. I quickly stepped in, trying to defuse the situation. "Hey, Kyle, why don't you grab a drink and chill for a second?" I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. But Kyle, who had clearly had more than enough to drink by this point, shrugged me off. "Nah, man. I'm good," he said, leaning towards Steve. "You think you can talk to me like that? I'm the life of the party. Everyone loves me." I felt a knot form in my stomach. This was exactly what I had been worried about. I tried to step in again, but before I could say anything, Kyle shoved Steve lightly, which only made Steve's temper flare up even more. Before anyone could react, Steve swung a punch at Kyle. It wasn't a huge punch, but it was enough to get the ball rolling. Kyle staggered back, holding his nose. He looked furious, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face Steve. "You're gonna regret that," Kyle spat, and just like that, things escalated from bad to worse. The next few minutes felt like a blur. People started shouting, and it quickly became clear that Kyle wasn't going to back down. I could hear him yelling at Steve, but then, in a shocking turn of events, Kyle charged at him. It wasn't a brawl, but it was chaos. The music kept playing in the background, completely out of place as I frantically tried to stop the fight from getting any worse. And then, the police showed up. I still don't know exactly how they got called. Maybe someone in the building heard the commotion, maybe someone in the crowd decided to make a phone call, but suddenly, 2 officers were standing in my doorway, looking confused and annoyed. One of them looked at me and asked, "What's going on here?" I didn't even know where to start. "It's a party, there was a fight." I was trying to explain, but it didn't matter. The second officer walked right over to Kyle, who was standing near the corner of the room, still ranting. "We got a call about a fight," the officer said. "You involved in this?" Kyle, in his drunken state, didn't even seem fazed. "Yeah, I'm involved." "That guy," he pointed at Steve, who was sulking by the window, "he punched me first." "But I'm the one getting arrested?" The officer raised an eyebrow. "You're under arrest for disturbing the peace and assault," he said. Kyle, still too drunk to process what was happening, started arguing with the officers. "What? You can't arrest me. I'm the one who got punched." I swear, this was like a bad comedy. People were looking at me like I had somehow invited this chaos into my life. I couldn't believe this was happening at my own birthday party. It didn't take long for the situation to spiral completely out of control. Kyle kept yelling and resisting the officers, and eventually, they had to physically restrain him and drag him out of my apartment. He was kicking and screaming the entire time, and I just stood there, completely mortified. The party ended on the spot. People began trickling out, some of them leaving quietly, while others were still talking about the incident. I was left in stunned silence, trying to piece together what had just happened. Jessie was furious, of course. She blamed me for not keeping an eye on Kyle. She didn't get why I hadn't done more to stop him from getting arrested. Honestly, I was just as shocked as she was. As it turns out, Kyle spent the night in jail. He was released the next morning, but I didn't hear the end of it from Jessie's family. They were all deeply upset about the arrest, and every family gathering after that was awkward. Jessie wasn't speaking to me for a week, and I had to do some serious damage control. Now, whenever we have family get-togethers, Kyle somehow finds a way to bring up the party in the most obnoxious way possible, and I swear, it's like everyone in her family just won't let me forget that I was the one who invited the chaos into my life. So yeah, that's how I managed to get my girlfriend's brother arrested at my own surprise party. Worst birthday ever. TIFU by trying to impress my crush with a simple homemade dinner and nearly burning my house down. I'm not usually the kind of person who tries to go overboard, but when it comes to impressing a girl, I've been known to occasionally go a little extra. Let me explain. A little over a month ago, I met this amazing girl, Sarah, at a coffee shop. She's one of those people who instantly makes you feel comfortable, and within the first 10 minutes of talking, we were laughing about the dumbest things. As the weeks went on, we started hanging out more and more, and it became clear we were both interested in each other. We'd text every day, talk about our favorite movies, music, and everything in between. I knew I had to do something special for her to show her I was serious about this. One evening, Sarah mentioned that she was into cooking, especially making dinner for friends. She casually said, "I've always wanted to have someone cook me a nice meal for once." As soon as I heard that, I immediately thought to myself, this is my chance. I decided I would cook her a dinner that would knock her socks off. Now, let me be clear, I'm not a chef. I can make ramen, scrambled eggs, and frozen pizza. That's about the extent of my culinary skills. But the idea of cooking a full-fledged meal for Sarah filled me with determination. I did some quick Google searches to figure out what a simple homemade meal could be. After some thought, I settled on making pasta with homemade Alfredo sauce, garlic bread, and a simple salad. How hard could it be? I spent the next few days in preparation, researching recipes and watching YouTube videos on how to make Alfredo sauce from scratch. I read several articles and watched tutorials on how to chop garlic properly, how to make the perfect salad dressing, and how to make sure the pasta was cooked just right. I had all the ingredients: fettuccine, butter, cream, parmesan, garlic, bread, lettuce, everything. This was going to be perfect. The day of the dinner, I told Sarah I was making dinner at my place and that I'd love for her to come over. She was excited and said she'd be there around 7 p.m. I had about 3 hours to prep everything, which was plenty of time, right? I started by making the garlic bread. I figured it would be simple, just butter, garlic, and bread. How could you mess that up? Well, I didn't factor in my tendency to get distracted. I put the bread in the oven and set the timer for 10 minutes. I decided to work on the pasta while it baked. The sauce seemed like it would be the trickiest part, so I thought I'd get that started right away. I started heating butter in a pan, but for some reason, the butter didn't melt as quickly as I had expected. I turned up the heat a little and threw in the minced garlic. In my mind, I was doing everything by the book. Then, I realized I didn't have a measuring cup for the heavy cream, so I guessed the amount. I poured it in, not realizing I'd accidentally grabbed the wrong kind of cream. I'd gotten half and half instead of full cream, which would later come back to bite me. With the sauce slowly coming together, I thought I'd check on the garlic bread. When I opened the oven, I immediately smelled something burning. I had left the bread in for way too long. The edges were crispier than I would have liked, but I could salvage it, I thought. I pulled the bread out, and even though it looked more like charcoal than golden brown, I convinced myself that maybe it would taste fine. Sarah was a good sport, right? She wouldn't judge me for slightly crispy garlic bread, right? Now, onto the pasta. I was feeling confident. The water was boiling, and I dropped the fettuccine in. I had read that you should stir the pasta constantly for the first minute to keep it from sticking. Naturally, I set a timer and left to check on the garlic bread again. Big mistake. I heard the timer go off, but instead of rushing back, I took a moment to check my phone for messages. And by the time I returned to the kitchen, the water had boiled over, and pasta was all over the stove. Panic set in. I quickly turned off the stove, grabbed the strainer, and tried to salvage whatever was left of the pasta. As I did, I realized I hadn't added enough salt to the water, which I had read was a huge mistake. I tried to salvage the pasta by throwing it back into the pot with the sauce, hoping it would work out. Spoiler alert, it didn't. At this point, the sauce was starting to separate, and the cream wasn't behaving the way it should have. It had turned into a lumpy, curdled mess. I was still determined to make this work, so I added more butter and more cheese, hoping to salvage it. It was a disaster, but I didn't have time to fix it. Sarah would be there any minute. Then came the final blow. As I was arranging the salad, I accidentally knocked the bowl off the counter. It shattered everywhere: glass, lettuce, cucumbers, and dressing splattered all over the floor. I froze for a moment. The dinner that I had spent all this time preparing was falling apart, quite literally. At that point, I was convinced Sarah was going to walk in and immediately turn around and leave. With my heart racing, I quickly started cleaning up the mess, but it was too late. I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, standing there with a bottle of wine in hand, smiling like she was about to walk into a 5-star restaurant. "Hey, sorry I'm a little early," she said, looking past me at the chaotic state of my kitchen. My stomach dropped. I invited her in, and she took a look at the kitchen. I tried to smile, but it was more of a nervous grimace. I had a bit of a situation in here," I said, gesturing to the disaster zone. "But it's still gonna be good. I swear." I led her to the table, where I had set up the plates, but the whole thing looked more like a crime scene than a dinner. She took a bite of the pasta, and to my surprise, she didn't say anything bad about it. She was actually kind enough to keep her face neutral. But when she bit into the garlic bread, she had to hide a wince. After a couple of awkward minutes, Sarah looked up and said, "You know, I appreciate the effort, but maybe next time we can just go out to eat instead?" And that's how I ended up trying to impress my crush with a dinner that nearly turned into an absolute catastrophe. I learned a valuable lesson that night. Sometimes, it's better to stick to what you know and not try to impress someone with a skill you don't have yet. But hey, at least Sarah and I are still friends, and I'm sure we'll laugh about this for years to come. Maybe next time, I'll just stick with ordering pizza. I've never been a great cook, but I can usually manage to get by. In fact, I'd say I'm an expert at basic things: cereal, microwave pizza, scrambled eggs, nothing too complicated. But, one night, I decided to change things up. I wanted to impress my roommate, who's a much better cook than I am. She makes things like gourmet pasta, roasted vegetables, and those fancy-looking salads with the weirdly expensive cheeses. I've always been kind of embarrassed by my cooking skills, so I thought maybe this was my chance to finally step up my game. After watching a few YouTube videos on how to make spaghetti from scratch, spoiler, it's not as easy as it looks, I decided to try making an actual dinner. It was going to be spaghetti with a meat sauce. Nothing too fancy, but it felt like a good start. I had a package of ground beef in the fridge, a box of spaghetti, and a jar of tomato sauce. Easy enough, right? Well, that's what I thought. The first step was to cook the ground beef. I grabbed a frying pan, tossed it onto the stove, and cranked the heat up. I didn't think to check if the pan was properly preheated or if I should have added oil, so, naturally, the beef started sticking to the pan right away. I should have just waited for the pan to heat up, but I was impatient. My thought process was, heat it up fast, get it done fast. So, I started stirring the beef like a maniac, hoping it would separate and cook through. While I was stirring, I noticed the smell of something burning. It wasn't overwhelming, just a little smoky. I figured it was probably the fat from the beef burning off or something. I didn't think much of it. Then, the smoke started to get thicker. I turned my head to look around the kitchen and realized there was a thin haze of smoke filling the air. At that point, I should have stopped and checked what was happening, but I panicked. I turned the stove's heat down, but the damage was done. The beef was sticking to the pan, and it looked like it was burning in places. Still, I was determined to salvage this meal, so I moved forward with my master plan. I moved the pan off the stove to the counter to try and salvage the meat, but as I picked it up, I accidentally knocked over a container of olive oil that was sitting next to the stove. It splashed everywhere, adding even more fuel to the fire, literally. My mistake hadn't just ruined my beef, it was now making the kitchen smell like an overcooked disaster zone. I grabbed the spatula, trying to stir the oil and meat in the pan, but when I lifted it up to give it another go, I saw the flame. There was a small, steady flame licking up from the burner. Panic hit me immediately. I froze for a moment, wondering if I was hallucinating. Was this really happening? Was my cooking disaster now turning into an actual fire? My brain scrambled for what to do next, but everything seemed like the wrong choice. Do I turn the burner off? Do I grab the pan and toss it into the sink? Do I throw water on it? I knew that was a terrible idea, but my brain wasn't functioning at its highest level. Instead, I just grabbed the pan with the flame still going and hurriedly moved it to the sink, trying to put out the flame with the cool water in the sink. Bad move. The water hitting the hot pan created an even bigger, more intense flare-up. It felt like a fireball for a brief second. At this point, I was in full-on panic mode. I started running around the kitchen like a madman, looking for anything that could help. A towel? No. A fire extinguisher? I didn't own one. Big mistake. I finally grabbed my phone and called 911, trembling as I spoke to the operator. The person on the other end was calm, but I wasn't. I was barely coherent. Help. I've set my kitchen on fire. It's bad. Please, send someone, please. The operator asked for my address and gave me instructions to stay on the line. I was in the middle of trying to figure out what the hell to do when I noticed the sound. It was the fire alarm. And it wasn't just a faint beep, no, this thing was screaming at me. It was like the loudest, most annoying sound I had ever heard in my life, echoing through the whole apartment. The alarm was so loud that I could barely hear myself think. I was sweating. My heart was pounding. I could feel the panic rising as I glanced around the kitchen. The smoke had completely filled the room. I didn't know how I had let it get this far. The fire trucks arrived quickly, and I could hear the sirens as they pulled up outside the building. At this point, my roommate had come running out of her room to see what the hell was going on. I could tell by the look on her face that she thought I had somehow caused a major disaster, because, well, I had. She was both furious and scared, but mostly just stunned at the fire department showing up to deal with a kitchen fire that was probably just a small grease fire that I had made exponentially worse. The firemen came in, looking unimpressed but calm, as they assessed the situation. One of them asked if I had tried to put it out with water, and I nodded sheepishly. He sighed and gently explained that I shouldn't have done that because it can make the fire worse, but at least I hadn't caused a full-blown kitchen inferno. They quickly turned off the stove and started venting the kitchen, opening windows and doors to let the smoke out. In the aftermath, the firemen gave me a stern lecture about fire safety and made me promise to never use water to put out a grease fire again. They even gave me a pamphlet on fire prevention. Honestly, at that point, I was too embarrassed to even argue. I apologized repeatedly and tried to make jokes to lighten the mood, but no one was really having it. My roommate was pissed, understandably. She spent the next hour airing out the apartment and complaining about how we both might have died because I couldn't manage to cook a simple meal. As for the spaghetti? Well, it never made it to the table. I ended up ordering takeout, and, after all that drama, it didn't even taste that good. I'll stick to my cereal for now, thank you very much. Lesson learned: if you're going to try cooking, don't treat your kitchen like an experiment gone wrong. And for the love of God, buy a fire extinguisher before you start. Oh, and maybe don't mess with the heat if you don't know what you're doing. Needless to say, my roommate is still talking about this incident. Every time I try to cook now, she asks, so, should I call the fire department first? TIFU by getting my neighbor arrested because of a sandwich. I never thought a turkey sandwich would lead to a felony arrest, a neighborhood feud, and me questioning every decision I've ever made involving condiments. But here we are. So I live in a quiet cul-de-sac in a suburban area where everyone pretends to be friendlier than they actually are. The kind of place where people wave at each other from the mailbox but secretly judge your lawn height. I moved in about 2 years ago. I'm single, early 30s, work from home as a freelance designer, and generally try to avoid drama like the plague. But apparently, drama does not care how conflict-averse you are when deli meat is involved. Let me introduce the key players in this suburban horror show. There's me. There's Greg, my across-the-street neighbor, in his late 40s, owns a pool cleaning business, and has an obsession with lawn ornaments shaped like animals. His yard looks like a Target garden aisle exploded. Then there's his wife, Nancy, always in velour tracksuits, always sipping white wine out of an insulated tumbler the size of a toddler. And then there's their 19-year-old son, Kyle. Ah, Kyle. The human monster energy can. Kyle doesn't do much except work part-time at a vape shop, blast EDM at 2 a.m., and train 4 MMA fights that don't exist. It started innocently. On a random Tuesday afternoon, I made myself a turkey sandwich. Normal stuff: sourdough bread, mayo, mustard, lettuce, tomato, pickles, turkey, a slice of pepper jack cheese. I took a bite, and it was divine. One of those moments where your taste buds hold hands and do the wave. I was in a good mood, so I decided to eat outside on my little patio. While I'm halfway through this sandwich, Greg walks by with his yappy little Pomeranian named Snickers. He stops, we do the neighborly nod thing, and he says, "That smells good." "What is it?" I jokingly reply, "Just the greatest turkey sandwich ever constructed by man." Greg laughs, makes a dad joke about opening a sandwich shop, and walks off. That's it. Or so I thought. Fast forward to 2 days later. I'm working, and I hear the doorbell ring. I open it and it's Kyle. Hoodie up, twitchy, holding what looks like a crumpled fast food bag. Yo, he says. My dad said you make good sandwiches? I blink. I guess. I made one. 2 days ago. Yeah, he says. Can I buy one? At this point, I thought he was kidding. So I laughed. Big mistake. He got dead serious and said, I'm not playin'. I got $20. Make me that turkey joint you had. Now, I should have said no. I should have closed the door, locked it, and moved on with my life. But there was something so hilariously bizarre about the situation that I said, fine, but you're not paying me. It's just a sandwich. He lights up. Hell yeah, bro. I go inside, make the same sandwich, and hand it to him in some wax paper. He takes one bite, groans like he's having a religious experience, and walks away without another word. This should have been the end. But it was just the beginning. 3 days later, Nancy shows up at my door. Velour, wine tumbler, big sunglasses. Are you the one selling sandwiches to my son? I clarify that I gave him one, just one, and it was free. She sips. Well, now he won't stop talking about your turkey masterpiece, and he's been pestering me to buy sandwich ingredients. He hasn't eaten Hot Pockets in 3 days. Do you have any idea what that does to a mother's nerves? I'm stunned, stammer some apology, and she waves me off. Just, keep your sandwiches to yourself, okay? I agree. And for the next week, peace returns. Until I find a note taped to my door. Yo bro. I need another hit. Same setup. Extra pickles. I laugh, toss the note, and don't respond. Then things start going missing from my porch. A bag of groceries I had delivered. A set of Bluetooth speakers I ordered. Even a freaking rotisserie chicken. Gone. I check my security cam. And sure enough, there's Kyle, hoodie up, doing shady porch raids at 3 a.m. like a raccoon with gym memberships. So I do what any responsible adult does. I go talk to Greg. I show him the footage, calmly explain what's been happening, and ask if he can handle it privately before I call the cops. Greg stares at the footage for a full minute, goes red in the face, mutters that little shit, and storms off. The next day, Kyle comes to my door with a black eye and a trash bag of random items. I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore, he mumbles, drops the bag, and leaves. Again, I think it's over. But oh no. 2 weeks later, I get a knock on the door. 2 police officers. They ask me if I've been distributing unauthorized consumables in the neighborhood. I think I'm being punked. Turns out, Nancy called the cops on me, claiming I was lacing sandwiches with drugs and illegally selling food without a license, which led to an investigation. After a whole mess of awkward conversations, a search of my kitchen, and me offering them both sandwiches just to prove a point, they realize it's a ridiculous misunderstanding. But it doesn't end there. While they're here, they run the footage I gave Greg again to verify Kyle's identity. Turns out Kyle is also a suspect in a string of petty thefts from porches across the neighborhood. Not just mine. Greg never turned the footage in. But I had backed it up. So now Kyle's being investigated for multiple thefts, and because he's technically an adult, he's facing actual charges. I didn't want this. Greg and Nancy now fully blame me for destroying their family. Greg won't wave at me anymore. Nancy glares at me like I skinned her dog. And Kyle? Kyle left a note in my mailbox. All you had to do was make me a sandwich. TIFU by pretending to be my twin brother for a date and accidentally getting engaged. Okay, let me preface this by saying I didn't plan to deceive anyone. I didn't wake up that morning and think, yeah, today feels like a great day to impersonate my identical twin and ruin a bunch of lives. It just kind of spiraled. So here's the setup. I'm Jake. My twin brother is Ryan. We're identical twins, like, carbon copy, switch places and our own mother can't tell identical. It's been our thing since kindergarten. He's always been the more confident one, the one who jumps into stuff. I'm quieter, more analytical. Where Ryan dates like he's in a montage, I've basically turned dating into a waiting game I'm losing. Last week, Ryan calls me in a panic. He's got this date lined up with a girl he met online, Emma. Apparently, they've been talking for weeks, lots of texts, phone calls, even some late-night video chats. But now, he's double-booked, he's got some last-minute work thing he can't bail on, and he's afraid Emma will ghost him if he cancels last minute. Just go and be me for like an hour, he says. Keep it vague, keep it light, order food, compliment her earrings, whatever. I'll call with an emergency and you leave. Smooth. Painless. I said no. Repeatedly. I said it was stupid. He begged. I cracked. So I show up at the restaurant, dressed like Ryan, hair styled like his, wearing his watch, his leather jacket. It felt stupid. I kept thinking someone would yell fraud as soon as I sat down. Then Emma walked in. She was stunning. But not in the intimidating way, more like, she walked in like she belonged wherever she went. Confident, self-aware, and when she smiled at me, it felt like someone turned the volume down on the world. I forgot my own name for a second, let alone Ryan's. We hit it off. Like, really hit it off. She was funny, quick, made fun of the waiter with me in a way that wasn't mean but just clever. We joked about weird Tinder profiles, talked about our favorite books, shared embarrassing pet stories. One drink turned into 3. Dinner into dessert. I forgot about the fake emergency call. I forgot I was pretending to be someone else. I just was, for the first time in forever, I felt like I was being seen, even if it was under the wrong name. Then she leaned in and kissed me. I panicked. I froze for half a second, but then, I kissed her back. And I swear, my conscience was screaming at me like a referee at a cheating scandal, but I didn't stop. I didn't want to. We walked outside, still laughing, a little tipsy, and she asked if I wanted to come over and watch the rest of the movie we joked about over dinner. My mouth said yes before my brain even voted. We didn't sleep together, just cuddled on her couch under a blanket, watching some old rom-com neither of us could focus on. I was in this weird bubble of happiness and dread. I left around 2 a.m. and drove home replaying the whole thing in my head. Ryan was waiting up. He'd already seen my texts about how I was staying longer than expected. He raised an eyebrow. Dude. What the hell? I told him everything. He laughed at first, then stopped when he realized how far I'd let it go. You kissed her? Jake, are you insane? Look, I said. I didn't plan it. But we connected. Like really connected. I haven't felt like that with anyone in, maybe ever. He just shook his head. You need to tell her the truth. Today. Before this turns into something way worse. I agreed. 100%. I even drafted a text a dozen times the next morning. But I didn't send it. Instead, we kept texting. We went on another date 2 days later. Then another. The longer I waited, the harder it got. I was falling for her, but under false pretenses. Every time she called me Ryan, I felt like I was stealing something. But then she'd laugh at one of my stupid jokes, and I'd just stay in the lie. It all came crashing down last night. We were at this cozy bar she liked, and after a couple drinks, she looked at me all serious and said, Ryan, I've never felt like this before. I think I love you. I panicked. I just stared at her, not breathing. And then she pulled out a ring box. A ring box, apparently, she'd been planning it for a few days. Said she knew it was unconventional, but when you know, you know. She got down on one knee, in front of the entire bar. I blacked out for a second. All I remember is her eyes, so full of hope, and 100 strangers watching us like a live rom-com. I said yes. I don't know why. I can't explain it. Some part of me thought I could fix it later. Some other part was screaming idiot, while clapping like an excited seal. The crowd erupted in cheers. Someone sent over champagne. People were clapping me on the back, toasting us. I was engaged to someone who didn't even know my real name. So now I'm sitting here in my apartment, staring at a ring I didn't buy, for a girl who loves a version of me that doesn't exist. Ryan hasn't spoken to me since I told him. Emma is blowing up my phone with cute selfies and ideas for our wedding. And I'm this close to ruining 3 lives because I couldn't say no to one tiny favor. TIFU. TIFU by taking my girlfriend to a family reunion and accidentally outing my cousin's secret life. So this happened a few weeks ago, and I've only just now gathered enough emotional stability to write it down. To preface this, I love my girlfriend. She's amazing. Smart, funny, and has a photographic memory that, in most situations, is a party trick. In this one, it was a nuclear warhead. Every year, my extended family gets together for a reunion that's part backyard barbecue, part sleepover, part wine-drunk therapy session. It's a whole weekend ordeal. My family is massive. I'm talking cousins of cousins, people I haven't seen since I was 9, and great-aunts who still call me by my baby nickname. This year was the first time I brought my girlfriend, Maddie. She was excited, a little nervous, and had spent the last 2 weeks doing the sweetest thing imaginable, trying to memorize who's who from a giant family tree I drew for her. I told her not to worry. Just smile, be yourself, and don't take Uncle Ray's moonshine. Famous last words. The first night was casual. Introductions, burgers, lawn chairs, uncles comparing grills. Maddie was a hit. Everyone loved her. She was charming and asked questions and remembered obscure things like, "Oh, you're the one who breeds hedgehogs, right?" to my second cousin Shelley. That sort of thing. I basked in her glow, sipping a beer, thinking life was perfect. Then came the real screw-up. The next day, we're all in the main backyard, close to 80 people now, and someone brings out the family trivia game. This was new. Apparently my cousin Joey's new wife had created this fun bonding activity where everyone submitted weird or funny facts about themselves anonymously, and we'd guess who it was about. Cool idea, I thought. What could possibly go wrong? Round after round, Maddie was unstoppable. Someone used to be a rodeo clown? That's Aunt Liz. And she'd be right. Someone was banned from Canada for reasons unknown? Uncle Tony. Nailed it. She was starting to get cocky, and I was just watching in awe. Then came the card that detonated the whole damn family. Joey's wife reads, "This person works as a professional dominatrix on weekends in a different city and has never told their family." Nervous laughter. Awkward shuffling. Someone jokes, "Sounds like a Netflix show." Maddie, without missing a beat, blurts out, "Oh, that's Cassandra. Your cousin, right? From your mom's side?" Silence. Time stopped. Birds stopped chirping. The grill sizzled in protest. Cassandra, my 28-year-old cousin who had been sitting a few feet away with her plate of potato salad, turned the color of a raw steak. Her fork froze mid-air. Her mom, my Aunt Diane, dropped her wine glass. Her dad looked like he'd just been told the earth was flat and we were the ones flying it. Maddie, blissfully unaware of what she'd just done, grinned. "She's based out of Denver, right?" I remember because I saw her photos on that dominatrix-themed Instagram account when I was researching for a costume party. She had the same tattoo as Cassandra, the little snake on her wrist. Super distinctive. I wanted the earth to swallow me whole. I was staring directly at my beer can, trying to astral project into it. Cassandra stood up, quietly put her plate down, and walked inside the house without saying a word. Her mom followed, hissing something that sounded like Latin for "You've defiled our bloodline." Someone awkwardly laughed. A child cried. I think a squirrel even dropped a nut out of sheer shock. It was chaos. People were murmuring, trying to figure out if it was a joke. Joey's wife looked like she was regretting every decision that led her to this moment. Uncle Ray said, "I need that moonshine now," and vanished. I turned to Maddie and whispered, "Babe, I don't think she wanted anyone to know that." She blinked. Wait, it was true. Reader, she wasn't joking. She just connected dots like a goddamn FBI profiler, not even realizing what kind of live grenade she'd just thrown into the family circle. That night, the reunion ended early. Like, early. My mom came up to me and said, "I think it's best if you guys head out tonight." Which, in family code, means leave now before Aunt Diane puts a hex on your descendants. Cassandra hasn't replied to any family messages since. There are rumors she moved back to Denver early. The group chat has been dead silent except for Aunt Liz sending a single gif of a cat knocking over a glass of wine. Maddie feels horrible. She apologized profusely to me, to my mom, even tried messaging Cassandra, no reply. She didn't mean to out anyone. She just thought it was a wild but easily guessable fact and forgot it was, a secret. As for me, I'm now known as the guy who brought Sherlock Holmes to a family game night and blew up someone's double life. Moral of the story, if your girlfriend is the Rain Man of family secrets, maybe leave her home when playing truth-based games. Or at the very least, screen the trivia questions like your life depends on it. Because sometimes, knowledge isn't power. It's just a bomb with perfect aim. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Spanish to impress my girlfriend's family. So this happened a few months ago, but the emotional damage is fresh enough that I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes. To set the scene, I'm a 28-year-old guy who met my girlfriend, Lucia, about a year ago. She's second-generation Mexican-American, born and raised in California. I'm from Ohio. She's smart, funny, gorgeous, and way out of my league. Early on she told me her family mostly spoke Spanish at home, especially her abuela, who doesn't speak much English. I, trying to be cool and supportive, told her I loved languages and had studied Spanish for years. This was a bit of a stretch. I took 3 years in high school and dropped it as soon as I got to college. My Spanish is basically a mix of Duolingo Level 1 and the Taco Bell menu. But Lucia was so impressed. She kept telling me how refreshing it was to meet someone who respected her culture. I had zero clue what I was setting myself up for. Fast forward to the big moment. Lucia invites me to a weekend family gathering, her cousin's birthday party. She tells me it's mostly immediate and extended family, lots of food, music, and everyone's really friendly. Then she drops the bomb, everyone's excited to hear you speak Spanish. Apparently, she'd told them I was fluent. I smiled like an idiot and said, "Can't wait." So I panic study. I download every Spanish app one can find, binge watch Narcos, with subtitles, and read children's books in Spanish. I convince myself I'll be okay if I just nod a lot, smile, and throw in the occasional sí, claro. We arrive, and I get the warmest welcome ever. Her family is amazing, hugging me, feeding me, offering me tequila before noon. Then comes abuela. Tiny, serious, with the eyes of someone who's seen through every lie since the Spanish Inquisition. She greets me in rapid-fire Spanish and then waits, expectantly. I panic. I say, "Estoy muy emocionado para el cumpleaños fiesta." She blinks. Lucia is looking at me like I just passed a secret test. Her aunt claps and says something like, "Que bien chico." And then, it begins. People swarm me, asking questions. One uncle starts talking to me about Mexican politics. Someone else is ranting about the Mexican soccer team's last game. I nod, say see when I think it's appropriate, laugh when others laugh, and repeat claro like it's a magic spell. It works for about 20 minutes. Then Abuela decides I should say grace before dinner. In Spanish. Lucia gives me an encouraging smile, completely unaware that I'm on the verge of throwing up into the guacamole. I stand up. I panic pray. I say something like, gracias por el comida. Y por la familia. Gracias por el pollo, y el amor, y la tortilla, y es muy importante, gracias, todos los días, amen. There's a silence. Then a laugh. Then the whole table erupts. Someone starts clapping. Lucia looks like she's going to cry, from pride or shame, unclear. I sit down, red-faced, and Lucia leans over and whispers, that was so sweet. I survived dinner. Barely. But my luck runs out during a game of Loteria, Mexican bingo. I'm sitting next to Abuela, and she keeps saying something to me every time a card is called. I don't understand, but I keep nodding like an idiot. Eventually, she says something and hands me her card. Now, my Spanish is trash, but I know she basically said mark this for me. So I take her pencil, and in what I believed was an act of kindness, I mark off all the spots on her card. Every single one. She stares at it, then at me, then says something I don't catch. Lucia hears and goes pale. Did you mark every spot? She asks. Yeah, I thought that was the, you just made Abuela lose on purpose. She was about to win. Apparently, I had helped her lose the final round of a very competitive family tradition where the winner gets a hand-painted wooden rooster that has been passed down for generations. The mood shifts. The music seems quieter. Abuela is now glaring at me like I kicked her dog and insulted her cooking. Later that evening, I try to redeem myself by helping in the kitchen. I offer to help wash dishes, and Lucia's mom, trying to be nice, says in Spanish something like, you're so sweet, but you're our guest. You should relax. And I, trying to be cute, reply, no, I'm the woman of the house. What I meant to say was I'll help like the lady of the house, or something charming. But what I actually said, according to Lucia, was closer to I am the woman now. Cue more stares. More confusion. Someone coughs to hide a laugh. Abuela mutters a prayer. Lucia finally pulls me aside and says, hey. I need to ask, are you actually fluent? And I, defeated and soaking in shame like a tortilla in mole sauce, confess everything. She laughs. Hard. Too hard. Then says, okay. We need to tell them before you accidentally propose to my uncle or declare war on Brazil. She translates my confession to her family, and thankfully, most of them laugh it off. Abuela just stares, then says something like, at least he tried, which I'm told is the highest praise she's given in 10 years. Lucia's still with me. I'm now taking actual Spanish lessons, partly because I want to connect with her family, and partly because I need revenge during the next Loteria. But yeah. That's how I faked fluency in Spanish, emotionally damaged a matriarch, and almost destroyed a family heirloom rooster. TIFU by accidentally faking my own death and ruining a friend's wedding. This happened about 2 years ago, but the consequences still linger in weird ways. Let me preface this by saying I am not someone who seeks drama. I actively avoid it. But apparently, I'm capable of creating enough for a full season of a soap opera without even trying. So it started with a plan to unplug. Work had been frying my brain for months. I was ghosting sleep, eating junk, and spiraling into a classic burnout. I decided I needed a total reset. My therapist suggested a digital detox and I agreed, but I took it a step further. I told everyone I was going on a camping trip up north, somewhere in Maine, and would be off-grid for 2 weeks. No signal. No reception. Just me, a rented cabin, books, and the occasional raccoon. I wasn't actually in Maine. I went to a small Airbnb in western Massachusetts that did have some service but was remote enough that I wouldn't be tempted to check my phone constantly. I told my boss, set up an out-of-office email, and informed close friends and family. I should have left it at that. But no, the chaos had to be summoned. My mistake? I gave my old college roommate, let's call him Brad, access to my apartment just in case something urgent came up. Brad's a good dude, but he's prone to catastrophizing. When I didn't respond to a group text about his upcoming wedding, which I had RSVP'd yes to months earlier, and then didn't answer a follow-up call or two, he got nervous. He stopped by my apartment a few days into my trip. Now, my apartment is, let's say, on the messy side. I'd left a half-finished load of laundry, my bed unmade, and a sink full of dirty dishes. Apparently, I also left a hoodie on the floor that looked suspiciously like it had blood on it. It was spaghetti sauce. Brad sees this scene, tries to call me again, gets no response, then decides to go full CSI. He calls the police. A wellness check is initiated. The cops come, see the state of the apartment, the sauce-stained hoodie, and my phone turned off, because I'd powered it down, and they don't jump to conclusions, but they do file a missing person report. Brad tells them I'd been acting weird lately and that he was worried about his friend's mental health. Which, rude, but not entirely wrong. This is where it starts to spin out. A small local news site picks up the story. Concern grows for missing man last seen in Boston. My face is plastered on a couple of sites, and someone starts a Facebook group, Help Find Dave, I'm Dave. Friends from high school, coworkers, old flames, everyone starts freaking out. But I have no idea because I'm blissfully unaware, making pour-over coffee in a mountain town and journaling like a wannabe Thoreau. It gets worse. Brad, in his emotionally overwhelmed state, takes my absence as a sign that I must have done something drastic. He cancels his bachelor party, breaks down crying during his own wedding rehearsal, and tells his fiancée he can't emotionally commit while his best man might be dead in a ditch somewhere. She, rightly, loses it. The wedding is not cancelled, but a fight ensues that is so intense it gets recorded and leaked on TikTok. Their argument goes viral because apparently drama at weddings is a crowd pleaser, and for about 36 hours, Dead Dave becomes a meme. Day 12 of my vacation, I finally decide to check my phone. I wake it up to over 300 missed messages, 60 voicemails, and a barrage of texts ranging from please call me to are you okay, to you selfish asshole. Confused, I start reading through them. Panic sets in fast. I call Brad first. He doesn't pick up. I call my mom. She answers on the first ring, sobbing. She thought I was dead. She had been calling hospitals and morgues. My sister had flown in from Texas. My dog had been temporarily adopted by my neighbor. I immediately start explaining, I wasn't dead. I was just detoxing. Which doesn't help. Apparently, saying I turned off my phone and disappeared without telling anyone is the same thing as saying I wanted you all to suffer emotionally. The aftermath was nuclear. Brad's fiancée made him sleep on his mom's couch for a week. The wedding went ahead, but I wasn't invited. My mom made me go to family therapy. My employer issued an awkward memo clarifying I had not, in fact, died, and HR had to rescind the sympathy gift basket they'd mailed to my emergency contact. I still have the fruit basket. It came with a candle that smells like lilies and guilt. A few people cut me off entirely. One guy I hadn't talked to since 2013 sent a message that just said typical. My landlord raised my rent, though I'm not sure that's related. And yes, I did consider leaving the country for a while, but ultimately I stayed, took accountability, and made a lot of uncomfortable phone calls. But the worst part? The meme. A photo of me holding a trout, taken from an old fishing trip, was screenshotted from my Instagram and captioned, "When you fake your death but still catch vibes." It became an ironic Twitter trend for a week. People started using "pulling a Dave" as slang for ghosting. Some influencer made a YouTube video about the dead Dave wedding incident and theorized it was a social experiment. It wasn't. It was just me being an idiot with a limited data plan and a highly concerned friend. So now I tell people when I'm going off-grid. I also have a group chat called I'm Alive FYI that I update periodically with selfies. It's mostly memes now, but it keeps people calm. And Brad? We're cool again. I wasn't the best man at his wedding, but I did DJ the reception eventually, 6 months later, at the makeup party. He made one request: no dead jokes. I didn't honor it. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend's dad with my handyman skills and flooding his entire house. This happened last weekend, and I'm only just now recovering enough to talk about it. So, I, 29M, have been dating my girlfriend Emma, 27F, for about a year. Things have been great, and she recently invited me to spend the weekend at her parents' place for her mom's birthday. I've met her parents a few times before, but this was the first overnight visit. Her dad, Bill, is your stereotypical man's man, ex-military, owns more power tools than I knew existed, and built his own shed from scratch. I, on the other hand, work in digital marketing, can barely hang a picture straight, and once called my landlord to screw in a new smoke detector. So when we arrived at their house, I was already trying to play it cool. You know, firm handshake, talk about football even though I don't know a single player, compliment his grill, all that. On Saturday morning, Bill was fiddling with something under the kitchen sink. I walked by, and he looked frustrated. Without thinking, I offered to help. "Oh, you good with plumbing?" he asked. Now, the correct answer would have been a polite but firm no, not really. But my brain short-circuited and I said, "Yeah, I've done some stuff here and there." I have no idea what stuff I was referring to. Maybe I once tightened a loose faucet? Regardless, that was enough for him. "Perfect," he said, sliding out from under the sink. "Maybe you can take a look. The sprayer hose is leaking, nothing major, but it's annoying." I nodded like I knew exactly what he meant. He even handed me his flashlight like we were two seasoned professionals passing a baton. Emma walked in at that moment and gave me a look that was somewhere between "please don't" and "I love you but why are you like this?" I climbed under the sink and started poking around. There was, in fact, a small leak in the hose connected to the sprayer. Water was beading and dripping down onto a rag. I figured, okay, I just need to tighten it or something. So I grabbed a wrench from Bill's meticulously organized tool wall in the garage, felt like I was defiling a sacred temple, and got to work. I twisted the nut where the hose connected to the water line. It wouldn't budge. I tried a little harder. Still nothing. So I cranked with all my strength and it suddenly gave way, a little too easily. There was a hiss, and then water started gushing out like I'd cracked a fire hydrant. It sprayed directly into my face, filled the cabinet, and within seconds, was pooling onto the kitchen floor. I screamed, which is apparently not what a handyman does, and scrambled backward like I was escaping a wild animal. Emma and her mom rushed in, and Bill yelled, "Turn off the main." I had no idea where the main valve was, so I ran outside and started randomly turning knobs near the foundation like a madman. By the time Bill got it shut off, the kitchen was a swamp. Water had spread across the tile and seeped into the adjoining carpet in the living room. And the cherry on top? It leaked through the ceiling into the basement, right onto his vintage stereo system from the 80s. That man loved that stereo more than some people love their children. The damage was bad enough that they had to call in a professional cleanup crew. I spent the rest of the weekend alternately apologizing and quietly researching how to identify main water shutoff valve on my phone. To his credit, Bill didn't yell. He didn't even glare at me. He just let out a long, slow sigh, the kind you imagine a man might exhale at the end of a war, and said, "Guess I'll add that to the list." That somehow hurt more than shouting. Emma tried to console me that night, saying it was an honest mistake, but I couldn't sleep. Not just from the shame, but because of the sound of industrial fans running 24/7 to dry the floors. It was like trying to sleep in the engine room of a cargo ship. The worst part? The actual leak that started it all wasn't even the sprayer hose. Bill later explained that I had cracked the compression fitting because I turned the wrong nut. He said this with the kind of polite neutrality you reserve for customer service calls and funerals. We left on Sunday after a very quiet breakfast. Her mom gave me a hug, which was either comforting or a gentle expression of condolence. Bill just nodded and said, "Safe drive." Emma squeezed my hand all the way home and said it'll make a great story someday. Well, here's that story. I'm never touching plumbing again. TIFU by agreeing to be my friend's wingman at a Renaissance fair and ending up in a medieval duel, half naked, covered in mead, and banned for life. This happened last weekend, and I still have bruises on parts of my body I didn't know existed. My best friend Jake is what you might call Renaissance fair royalty. Every year he goes all in, authentic costume, fake accent, flirtation with milkmaids, the works. I, on the other hand, am more of a jeans and t-shirt, avoid human interaction type. But Jake begged me to come along this year, claiming his ex was going to be there with a new guy and he needed backup. Just be my wingman, he said. Look awkward and make me look cool by comparison. I can do that. I am excellent at looking awkward. So Saturday rolls around, and Jake lends me a spare costume he had. By costume, I mean a glorified potato sack with a belt and some leather boots that reeked of mildew and old feet. Apparently, I was supposed to be a humble blacksmith's apprentice. I looked more like a barefoot vagrant who'd been time-traveled from a 14th century penal colony. We get there, and Jake immediately switches into character, speaking in that fake ye old English voice that sounds like Shakespeare mated with a pirate. He's all, "Good morrow, fair lady, and methinks the sun doth smile upon thy visage, to every woman in sight." Cringe, but whatever. Things go south when we reach the mead tent. Jake spots his ex, let's call her Gwen, laughing with some guy who looks like he eats CrossFit for breakfast. Jake, suddenly desperate to assert dominance, decides to buy an entire horn of mead and chug it in front of them. Peer pressure kicks in, and he challenges me to do the same. Now, I'm not a drinker. I have the alcohol tolerance of a baby goat. But I don't want to look lame, so I slam the mead. Bad move. Within minutes, I am flushed, burping honey-tinged air, and sweating through my burlap tunic. My stomach starts doing flips. Jake, meanwhile, tries to assert his alpha status by loudly telling Gwen's new guy that he was the one who taught her how to sword fight. Both kinds, he says with a wink. The guy, whose name turns out to be Marcus, doesn't appreciate that. Turns out, Marcus is a regular at the fair and an actual HEMA, historical European martial arts, instructor. He carries a broadsword. Like, a real one. Jake, still riding the mead wave, challenges Marcus to a duel for Gwen's honor. Gwen looks mildly amused and very drunk. The crowd, because of course there's a crowd forming, starts cheering. Somehow, I get roped into it. Bring my squire to bear witness. Marcus shouts, pointing at me. Before I know it, I'm dragged into the center of the arena, which is just a big open field ringed with hay bales and cosplayers with foam axes and turkey legs. Jake is handed a practice sword by some overly enthusiastic LARPer. Marcus has his own and is already warming up like he's in the final boss fight of a medieval video game. I am told my job is to act as Jake's second, which apparently means yelling motivational phrases and holding his cloak. Problem: Jake is not a sword fighter. He's a drama major who once got a concussion falling off a stage during a Shakespeare in the Park production. They clash swords. It lasts all of 30 seconds. Marcus deftly disarms Jake, sends his sword flying into a bale of hay, and then taps him on the chest with the flat of his blade. Jake dramatically collapses like he's been shot by a cannon. I panic. I sprint onto the field to check on him, forgetting that I'm carrying his mead horn and wearing boots that are 3 sizes too big. I trip, fall face first into Jake, and spill the remainder of the mead all over both of us. The crowd gasps. Someone yells sorcery, because apparently that's the theme now. Marcus, seeing the chaos, points his sword at me and accuses me of interfering in a trial by combat. A man in a jester outfit declares, "Let the peasant face the consequences." Before I can protest, I'm pulled up by two burly guys in chainmail and informed I must face the dunk of shame. This is a real thing, by the way. They have a dunk tank for people who break character or rules during the fair. I am marched over to it like a prisoner of war. The guy operating it is dressed like a dungeon master and is way too into his job. He cackles and announces my crime over a megaphone. Lo, a cowardly knave who did spill sacred mead upon a noble warrior. May he be cleansed of his treachery in the waters of purification. I'm shoved onto the platform. The crowd chants dunk. 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 Some woman throws a tomato at me. I flinch, slip off the platform, and fall into the water before anyone even hits the target. Humiliation complete, I'm soaked, shivering, and smell like a combination of yeast, regret, and grass stains. I make my way out of the tank, but my belt has come loose, and my costume starts slipping. I don't notice until I hear a kid yell, "Mom, that guy's pants are falling down." I turn, trip over my own wet tunic, and moon at least 24 people, including a family with matching elf ears and a vendor selling candied bacon. Security, finally realizing I am the nucleus of this unfolding disaster, escorts me and Jake, still pretending to be mortally wounded, off the premises. On the way out, a woman dressed as a crone hisses, "Thou art banned from this realm, ye disgraceful sots." Jake turns to me and says, "Best wingman ever." We are now banned from the Tri-County Renaissance Fair circuit for disruptive behavior, unauthorized combat, and general buffoonery. Honestly, it could have been worse. At least I didn't challenge a centaur to arm wrestling. TIFU by pretending to be someone's boyfriend for free food. This happened a few years ago but still haunts me. Back when I was in college, I was chronically broke and living on the edge of overdraft. I was surviving off ramen, peanut butter, and the free coffee they gave out in the library if you asked nicely enough. So when I got a chance to eat real food, I took it without asking too many questions. That was my first mistake. It started on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of finals week. I was sitting in the student union, half asleep, trying to force down a granola bar when this girl, let's call her Amanda, sat down next to me. Amanda was in my intro to psych class. We'd never talked, but I recognized her immediately. She was one of those effortlessly cool people who wore vintage clothes without looking like she was trying too hard and somehow managed to look awake during every 8 a.m. class. She leaned in and whispered, "Hey, I know this is super weird, but can you do me a massive favor?" Now, when a cute girl opens with that line, my brain short-circuits a little. I blinked and said something like, "Sure." Amanda explained that her family was in town visiting, and she'd told them she was dating someone. Apparently, they'd been on her case about putting herself out there and finding a nice boy, and she got tired of it and invented a boyfriend. Long story short, she needed someone to play the part for one dinner. "I'll pay," she said. "It's a really nice restaurant, and honestly, you just have to sit there and nod like you're in love with me." I was starving and not entirely opposed to the idea of pretending to be Amanda's boyfriend for a night. I asked her what the catch was. "No catch," she said. "We're just meeting my parents and younger sister. They're in town for one night. After that, you never have to see them again." The words "free dinner" echoed in my mind like a hymn. I agreed. That evening, I met Amanda outside a fancy Italian place downtown. She looked amazing, like she'd stepped out of a magazine. I'd tried my best with a button-down and the only pair of jeans I owned that didn't have holes in the knees. As we walked inside, she quickly briefed me. We'd been dating for 4 months, we met in the library, I was majoring in political science, not true, I was a history major, and my name was Ethan. I asked why I couldn't use my real name, and she just said, "Ethan sounds more like a guy my parents would approve of." Red flag? Probably. But my stomach overruled my brain. Dinner started out fine. Her parents were older, polite, and suspiciously enthusiastic. Her mom grilled me with questions about my political science classes, so I mumbled something about Machiavelli and tried to steer the conversation back to safe ground. Her dad mostly just sipped wine and nodded, occasionally throwing in a, "That's great to hear, son." Amanda's younger sister, maybe 16, sat across from me and stared like I was some kind of rare zoo animal. Somewhere between the calamari and the lasagna, things went sideways. Her dad leaned forward and said, "So, Ethan, what are your intentions with our Amanda?" I choked on my water. Amanda kicked me under the table and gave me a look that clearly meant, "Say something charming and harmless." I scrambled. "Well, sir, I think Amanda's amazing. She's smart, funny, driven. I'm really lucky." Her mom practically swooned. Her sister gagged audibly. Amanda looked flustered. Then came dessert. Her dad ordered a bottle of expensive wine. Her mom asked if I'd be joining them for brunch the next day. Amanda tried to shut that down fast, but they insisted. "You can't date our daughter for 4 months and not meet her grandparents." "Grandparents?" Amanda looked panicked. I whispered, "You said one night." She whispered back, "I didn't think they'd like you this much." And then, as the check came and Amanda reached for her purse, her dad waved her off and said, "Nonsense. Ethan's family now." He paid the whole bill, including the wine. My meal alone would have bankrupted me for a week. As we walked out, Amanda hissed, "I'm so sorry, but you have to come tomorrow. They'll know something's up if you bail now." Now, this is where I should have noped out. But again, free brunch. Next morning, I met them at a hotel buffet. More family had arrived. Her grandparents, an aunt, 2 cousins. It was like a mini reunion. And they all wanted to meet Ethan, the amazing boyfriend. I was dying inside. I had to remember lies on top of lies, answer follow-up questions about things I barely remembered saying the night before. Her aunt asked me if I had siblings. I said older brother, which was true. She asked if he was married. I said yes. He's not. Then she asked what his wife did, and I blanked and said pharmacist, because it was the first profession I thought of. Apparently, Amanda's aunt is a pharmacist. "Oh really? What pharmacy?" she asked. Rite Aid?" I guessed. "Which one?" I excused myself to the bathroom and stayed there for 10 minutes trying not to scream into the mirror. When I came back, Amanda's dad clapped me on the back and said, "You're a good man, Ethan. We've been praying Amanda would find someone like you." By the end of brunch, they were talking about planning a vacation. A family trip. With me. Amanda and I walked outside, silent. Finally, she said, "I messed up." I agreed. "I'll tell them we broke up," she said. "In a few weeks." Gently. "Make it mutual," I added. We parted ways. I figured that was the end of it. But then, 3 days later, I was walking across campus and heard someone shout, "Ethan." It was Amanda's little sister. With a friend. I turned and smiled weakly. "You're even cuter in the daytime," she said. I kept walking. A week later, Amanda's dad sent me a LinkedIn request. 2 months after that, her mom tagged me in a Facebook post, "So glad Amanda found such a wonderful guy." I didn't even have Facebook. She tagged some other poor Ethan. I changed my phone number. I deleted the LinkedIn. I avoided every psych class until the semester ended. Amanda and I never spoke again. Sometimes, though, I wonder what happened when she finally told them we broke up. I hope she blamed me. I hope she told them I cheated or got weirdly into conspiracy theories. Anything to explain why golden boy Ethan disappeared off the face of the earth. To this day, whenever I pass that Italian restaurant, my stomach growls, and my soul shrinks. Never accept free food from a stranger. That's the real lesson here. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend's dad with a grill I didn't know how to use, so this happened about a month ago, and I'm only now crawling out of the emotional wreckage far enough to share it. For context, I, 27M, have been dating my girlfriend Emily, 25F, for about a year. Things are great. We're at the stage where we're meeting each other's families, talking about the future, etc. Her dad, let's call him Jack, is like someone carved a suburban Ron Swanson out of granite. He's a no-nonsense, hyper-competent ex-Marine who now teaches high school shop class and smokes his own bacon. He's not mean or rude, but he definitely has a resting face that makes you feel like you're being silently judged. And to be fair, you probably are. Anyway, a few weeks ago, Emily invites me to her parents' place for a weekend barbecue. This would be my third time meeting them, but the first time where it wasn't just a quick dinner. It was also the first time I'd be meeting some extended family, uncles, cousins, a couple of old Marine buddies of Jack's. Basically, an entire backyard full of human lie detectors. I'm nervous but trying to act cool. We get there Saturday around noon, and the backyard looks like a damn magazine spread, perfect grass, rustic wood furniture, American flag fluttering over the deck, and the centerpiece, a monstrous stainless steel grill that looked like it could launch satellites. Jack's pride and joy. I'm sipping a beer, trying not to sweat, when Jack comes over and says something that nearly made me choke. You ever work a grill, son? Now here's the thing. I've cooked. I can pan-fry a steak and make a halfway decent scrambled egg. But grilling? Not my domain. The only thing I've ever grilled was a single chicken breast on a flimsy $30 portable grill during college, and I burned that so badly it looked like meteorite. But in that moment, surrounded by testosterone and barbecue smoke, I did what every insecure idiot has done since the dawn of time. I said, yeah, I've grilled a bit. Jack nods, says, great. Mind helping me get the burgers going while I finish seasoning the ribs? Now I'm in it. I walk over to the grill, trying to look confident while internally screaming. I lift the lid. It's already hot. There's a tray of burger patties next to it, each one seasoned and shaped like a work of art. I take a spatula and gently place a few on the grill. So far, so good. Except I don't realize the heat is cranked to what feels like nuclear. Within 30 seconds, I hear sizzling turn into violent crackling, and flames leap up like I've summoned a demon. The burgers are instantly charred on the bottom. I panic and flip one, only to find it's blacker than the void. I flip the others in a frenzy, now sweating profusely. My confidence has left the chat. At this point, Jack walks over and peers into the grill. He says nothing. Just watches. I try to explain. I think the heat was up a little high. He holds up a hand. Let me show you something. He takes the spatula, moves the burgers to a cooler zone, adjusts the knobs, then does this sorcery move where he closes the lid and cracks it just slightly for airflow. Then he looks at me and says, grilling's not about fire. It's about control. You rush it, you ruin it. I nod like I'm receiving ancient wisdom from a monk, which I basically am. He walks off again. Here's where the real F ****** up begins. I'm now determined to fix my mistake and redeem myself. While he's working on the ribs, I remember a tip I once heard, adding beer to meat while grilling makes it juicier. And I just so happened to be holding a bottle of IPA. So I tilt the bottle and poured just a little over the patties. It was not just a little. What I didn't know is that the drip tray under Jack's grill hadn't been cleaned in a while. Which meant it was full of rendered fat. Which meant it was a ticking time bomb. As soon as that beer hit the hot grease, the grill let out a sound like a jet engine and a column of flame shot up 3 feet into the air. I yelped and stumbled back. The lid slammed shut from the force. Smoke started billowing out in thick gray clouds. Alarms went off somewhere inside the house. I could hear people yelling. Jack comes sprinting back like a man who just heard a gunshot. He opens the lid with oven mitts, and it's like someone opened the gates of hell. The burgers are engulfed. The inside of the grill is pitch black. The knobs are melted. He doesn't say a word. Just turns off the gas, pulls the burgers into a metal tray, somehow two survived, and looks at me like I'd just pissed on the Constitution. People were nice about it, but I could feel the shift. For the rest of the afternoon, nobody asked me to help with anything. At one point I tried to bring out a tray of drinks and someone said, "Maybe just sit down, buddy." Emily was incredibly gracious. She tried to console me later that night, saying, "It's okay, babe, it's just a grill," which is the romantic equivalent of telling someone, "Your dog's in a better place now." I offered to pay for repairs or a replacement, but Jack refused. Instead, he invited me over the next weekend for what he called grill school. I thought it was a joke. It was not. The next Saturday at 8 a.m. sharp, I showed up at his place and spent 5 hours learning about meat temperatures, smoke control, grill zones, seasoning techniques, and fuel efficiency. He even made me take notes. He still doesn't fully trust me near fire, but last weekend he let me flip the hot dogs. That's progress, I guess. TIFU by trying to surprise my girlfriend and accidentally starting a small-town scandal. So this happened last weekend, and I'm still trying to piece together how everything went so catastrophically wrong. For background, I, at 27M, have been dating my girlfriend Emily, 26F, for about a year now. We met in the city where we both live and hit it off fast. She's the type who's super close to her family, and I've met them a few times, mostly her parents and her younger brother Jake. Nice people. They live in this quaint little town about 2 hours from the city, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, and news travels faster than light. Last month, Emily had to go back to her hometown for a few weeks because her mom had minor surgery and needed help around the house. She asked if I'd come visit one weekend, and I said of course. But being the romantic idiot I am, I decided instead to surprise her early, unannounced, with flowers and her favorite pastries from this bakery she loves. I timed it so I'd arrive late Friday night. I texted her goodnight like usual, pretending I was home, then drove out. The plan was to knock on her parents' door in the morning, surprise her, and spend the weekend with her and her family. Except I never got the chance. I pulled into her neighborhood around midnight. I didn't want to wake up her parents, so I parked a couple streets down and decided to sleep in my car for a few hours. Around 5:30 a.m., just before sunrise, I woke up, cleaned myself up a bit with some face wipes and breath spray like some kind of suburban ninja, and walked to her house with my little surprise package in hand. I get there and immediately realize I've miscalculated. There are no lights on. Curtains drawn. Not even the porch light is on. Still, I figured maybe they were just heavy sleepers, so I gently rang the doorbell. No answer. Waited. Tried again. Still no answer. Now I'm standing there on the porch with a dozen tulips and a bag of croissants, wondering what the hell to do. So I start walking around the side of the house, thinking maybe I'll peek in the kitchen window or knock on the back door. This is where the first red flag appears. As I get to the backyard, I see a guy, shirtless, barefoot, standing in the kitchen, looking at his phone and drinking coffee. Not Emily's dad. My heart sinks. Then I think, maybe it's a cousin? A neighbor? And then Emily walks into the kitchen. Wearing only a t-shirt. One of my t-shirts. She kisses him. I drop the pastries. They both look up, and the guy yells something like "what the hell," and Emily turns pale. I turn around and just start walking, no idea where I'm going, just trying to hold it together. I make it back to my car, drive 10 minutes to a gas station, and sit in the lot, completely numb. An hour later, Emily calls. I don't answer. She texts, saying she can explain. I tell her not to. Here's where it goes from rom-com heartbreak to full-blown town scandal. Apparently, the guy she was kissing? That was Kevin. Kevin is married. Kevin is also the pastor of their church. The married pastor. With 3 kids. And, I come to find out, a very recognizable truck that the neighbors definitely saw in the driveway overnight. Small town. Lots of gossip. By 10 a.m., her mom already knew something had happened because Mrs. Tilling from across the street called asking if the rumors were true. By noon, Kevin's wife showed up at the house demanding to speak to Emily. Cops were called, not for violence, but to keep the peace, and by Saturday evening, Kevin had taken a leave of absence from the church, and Emily was hiding out at a friend's house. And me? I was just trying to bring her breakfast. Over the next few days, I learned more than I ever wanted to about the mess. Emily and Kevin had apparently been talking for a few months. Nothing physical until recently, she swore. He'd told her he was in a loveless marriage, and that he was going to leave his wife eventually. You know, the oldest script in the infidelity playbook. She never meant for it to go public, and especially not like this. She was sobbing when I finally answered her call, saying she ruined everything and didn't know what she was thinking. I wish I could say I yelled or told her off or gave her some empowering breakup speech, but mostly I just listened. Told her I was heartbroken, but she needed to figure her life out. And that I couldn't be part of it anymore. Now here's the kicker. Apparently, Kevin's wife had suspected something was up for a while and had started going through his phone. She hadn't found anything concrete. But guess who left a very heartfelt, very revealing handwritten card in the croissant bag on Emily's front porch? This guy. So in addition to seeing me outside and hearing Emily stammer through a half-baked explanation, Kevin's wife got physical evidence. And she used it. According to one of Emily's friends, the card ended up getting passed around among some of the more gossipy women in town like it was the Zapruder film. I wrote that she was the love of my life, that I couldn't wait to build a future with her, that I admired her strength and grace and all that poetic crap you write when you think you're surprising your girlfriend with breakfast and not walking into a Jerry Springer episode. So now, the town not only knows that the pastor was cheating on his wife, but that he was cheating with a girl who was very much dating someone else, and receiving handwritten love letters from him. Needless to say, I'm not welcome in that town anymore. Not that I have any reason to go back. Emily and I are done. She's supposedly in therapy, trying to understand what led her down that path. Kevin's wife filed for separation, and he's staying with a friend out of town. My croissants went uneaten. And that's how I went from a romantic surprise to the accidental whistleblower in a small-town scandal that ended a marriage, a relationship, and a religious career, all before lunch on a Saturday. TIFU by pretending to be my girlfriend's cat for 6 months. So this happened over the course of about 6 months and blew up in my face last week. For context, I, 29M, have been dating my girlfriend, Megan, 26F, for just under a year. Things were going great, amazing chemistry, shared love of indie music, ramen, and bad horror movies. But Megan has one particular quirk that I found interesting. She has a cat. A very spoiled, pampered, grumpy cat named Beans. From the day I met her, Megan told me she had a special bond with Beans. I thought that just meant he was her emotional support animal or something. Nope. Beans has his own voice. Not just a voice. A personality. A full-blown character. She speaks for him in a high-pitched voice and has conversations with him, *lengthy conversations, about everything from how annoying coworkers are to whether or not they should order Thai or pizza. The kicker? She expects the cat, aka Beans, to respond. Not just a meow or a purr. Full sentences. So she'll say something like, "Beans, should we go to that movie night or stay in?" and then expect Beans, me, to answer in his voice. When we first started dating, I thought it was cute. Weird, but cute. I figured it was just a thing she did occasionally. I was wrong. She insisted I help Beans talk when I was around. At first I was like, sure, okay, Beans says we should stay in and order sushi, and she was delighted. But very quickly, the expectations escalated. I had to maintain a consistent voice and backstory for Beans. According to Megan, Beans has a dry British wit, hates Megan's ex-boyfriend, loves vintage jazz, and refers to me as the large man who feeds me. It was exhausting, but I went along with it. I figured, hey, relationships are about compromise. If I have to do a weird cat voice now and then, fine. Then the pandemic lockdown hit and we decided to move in together. That's when I discovered that Megan fully believes Beans is a sentient being with complex thoughts and feelings. I couldn't just phone it in anymore. She started asking Beans for advice on real issues, family drama, career changes, even our sex life. One night she asked Beans if he thought we were compatible long-term, and I panicked and said, in the Beans voice, I believe your souls align, but your sleep schedule is off-putting. She took that as a legitimate relationship critique and started trying to go to bed earlier, for the cat. Things got weirder. She started writing down Beans' thoughts in a journal. She'd reread them to me over breakfast like scripture. Do you remember when Beans said the ocean makes him sad because it never stays still? So poetic. I started resenting this imaginary third party in our relationship who had more emotional input than I did. Still, I kept up the charade. For 6 months. Every single day. Beans, by the way, is the most indifferent animal on the planet. He doesn't give a damn about anything. He once peed in Megan's favorite shoes and she tearfully said, he must be acting out because I haven't been emotionally available. She poured her soul into this furball. So last week, the inevitable happened. We were at her sister's birthday party on Zoom. Her whole family was there, parents, siblings, grandma. Her sister has a dog, and the two of them were jokingly comparing pet antics. Someone asked, so what's the latest thing Beans has said? And Megan, without hesitation, said, let's ask him. She picks up Beans, holds him to the camera, turns to me and goes, babe, what does Beans have to say to Auntie Julie? I panicked. I was tired. I had a headache. And I was done. So I blurted out, in my best Beans voice, Julie, stop asking about me. I'm a cat, not your therapist. Also, your dog smells like hot garbage and fear. Silence. Then Megan whispers, that's not how Beans talks. I try to salvage it with, well, he's in a mood today. She slowly sets Beans down, mutes the call, and turns to me with the most serious look I've ever seen. You're not Beans. What? You're not Beans. You don't get him. You've been faking. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. She said she knew something was off for weeks. Beans hadn't spoken like himself lately. His vocabulary had changed. His insights weren't as profound. She said I was treating Beans like a joke, and that I clearly didn't respect their connection. I tried to explain I'd been trying my best, but I wasn't a professional cat medium. She started crying, saying I'd broken her trust, and that I'd mocked the only creature who ever really understood her. She asked me to leave. So I packed a bag, and now I'm staying at a friend's place. We haven't spoken since. I tried texting, but she replied, Beans doesn't want to talk right now. So yeah. I got dumped by my girlfriend and her cat. TIFU. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.